Daniel's signature trembled only once before the pen settled, dragging its final stroke across the contract like a knife closing a wound. "Congratulations, Mr. Reid," the investor said, smiling as he slid the folder shut. The sound of paper meeting leather felt heavier than thunder. Daniel's throat burned. He told himself it was pride. It wasn't. It was guilt wearing a mask that fit too perfectly. The vineyard had always smelled of crushed grapes and sunlight. Now it smelled like loss, though only one person would know that soon enough. His mother, Evelyn Reid, 62, silver hair tied in a low bun, hands scarred from decades of harvest. She had built the vineyard after his father's death, pouring her grief into every vine. Daniel told himself she was tired, that she wouldn't understand progress. He didn't dare call it betrayal. He called it opportunity. He watched the ink dry and convinced himself it meant freedom. The investors, sharp suits and colder smiles, handed him the first payment, a wire transfer worth more than he'd ever seen blinked into his account. To the future, one of them toasted, raising a glass of imported wine. Not theirs. Daniel forced a grin. His mother's voice echoed faintly in memory, telling him, "Money means nothing if it costs your name." He shut it out. He was already planning renovations for a new life in the city. By the time he returned home, evening light was slipping through the vineyard rows, painting gold across the leaves. Evelyn was on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "You missed dinner," she said softly. "I had a meeting," he replied, stepping past her. She smiled faintly, the way mothers do when they already know something is being hidden, but choose to wait for the truth to reveal itself. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Better than ever," he said. His voice cracked slightly, but she didn't press. That silence, patient, loving, would haunt him later. In the following weeks, Daniel buried himself in business calls and paperwork. The investors praised his charm, his vision. He told them the vineyard was an old story, one that needed rewriting. They nodded, not caring about roots, only profit. Meanwhile, Evelyn noticed things. Delivery trucks arriving without her knowledge. Men surveying the fields. One morning, she found a new company sign lying against the fence. Warren Estates Acquisition Group. Her hand trembled as she touched it. The name wasn't hers. It wasn't Daniel's either. That night, Daniel came home late again. She was waiting at the kitchen table, a single lamp casting a halo of warm light between them. "Who are those men in our field?" she asked. He hesitated. "Partners. Just checking the land value." Her eyes narrowed, calm but cutting. "You didn't tell me we had partners." He laughed softly, too loud. "Mom, it's nothing serious. Just investors." She studied him for a long time, her silence like the slow tightening of a rope. "Your father used to say," she murmured, "that honesty keeps the vines alive. Lies dry them from the roots." He shifted in his chair, forcing a smile. Dad was a farmer, not a businessman. She looked at him then, really looked, and something inside her heart folded quietly. Later that night, she went to her study. Old folders, deeds, and the original vineyard papers lay neatly arranged. The next morning, one of them was missing, the one she remembered placing beneath a framed photo of Daniel's father. She walked to the office downtown, pretending to deliver wine samples. When she asked the clerk for the land record, the woman hesitated before saying, "It's under Daniel Reid's name now. Sold 2 weeks ago." Evelyn thanked her, walked out, and didn't breathe until she reached her car. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel until the veins showed. That night, Daniel arrived home to find her sitting outside under the vines, a bottle open beside her. "You always wanted more," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I hope you know what more costs." He frowned, the air suddenly heavy. "What are you talking about?" She stood, brushing off her apron, her face calm as stone. "Nothing yet. Just remember, silence isn't the same as forgiveness." She turned and walked inside. For the first time, Daniel felt smaller than the boy who used to chase fireflies here. Weeks turned to months. He moved to the city, wearing tailored suits, shaking hands with people who never asked where the vineyard came from. Money poured in, and he spent it faster than he earned it. Cars, condos, parties that blurred into mornings. But the vineyard news never left him. Each time his phone rang from the estate, he let it go to voicemail. One evening, he returned to his penthouse to find his reflection in the glass door staring back hollow-eyed. The message light blinked red. One new voicemail. His mother's voice. "They're changing the vineyard's name next week," she said quietly. "You should come see it once more. Even graves deserve witnesses." The message ended, leaving only the hum of silence. He poured a drink, his hands shaking, and stared out at the city lights that looked nothing like stars. For the first time, they felt like judgment. He told himself she'd understand someday, that success would make her proud. But deep down, he knew pride built on theft never stood long. 2 days later, he got a letter from one of the investors. Delayed payments, partnership restructuring, and the first whispers of debt. Panic scratched at the edges of his calm. He picked up the phone, dialed his mother's number, then hung up before the first ring. That night, the power went out in his apartment, leaving him alone with the sound of his own breathing. He opened his laptop, scrolled through the digital copy of the contract, and froze. The signature on one clause was different. Not his, not hers. Someone had amended the ownership line. He stared, confused, until realization crawled up his spine. Someone else had seen the deal. Someone had already started watching him. The hum of the city outside grew distant, drowned by the echo of his mother's voice from that night. Silence isn't forgiveness. Daniel closed the laptop slowly, his reflection flickering in the dark screen. The first crack in his perfect world had just begun to show. The first notice came printed in gold letters, folded neatly inside an envelope marked Urgent Financial Statement. Daniel opened it with a flick of his thumb, expecting another congratulation or investment update. Instead, the words hit harder than any slap. Payment default 30 days. He read it twice before realizing what it meant. His investors were pulling out. The accounts he thought overflowing had quietly begun to drain. He called the office, demanded explanations, cursed, and paced until his voice cracked. But behind every reply came the same cold phrase, "We're restructuring." By evening, Daniel sat alone in his glass-walled apartment, staring at the city's reflection bleeding across his windows. His reflection looked older, tired. Maybe that was the price of ambition. He took a deep breath, convinced it was just a setback. Then his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. A photograph. It was a vineyard, stripped bare, its sign half removed. Beneath it stood his mother, hands behind her back, watching workers dismantle the name Reid estate. No caption, no warning. Just silence captured in pixels. Daniel's throat closed. He typed 3 words. "What you doing?" But never sent them. He deleted the image, poured another drink, and told himself she couldn't hurt him anymore. The next morning, creditors began calling. Promises turned to threats. A former partner accused him of falsifying returns. Each lie he'd stacked now turned into paper cuts, slicing deeper every time someone demanded proof. By week's end, Daniel's empire, built on charm and shortcuts, was crumbling. The more he tried to fix it, the faster it collapsed. One night, as rain pattered faintly outside, he found himself back at his computer, scrolling through old family photos. There was Evelyn, standing beside his father, sunburned, smiling, holding him as a boy with dirt on his cheeks. He remembered that day, harvest season, when his mother had given him his first glass of grape juice and said, "Taste this. It's not ready yet. Good things take patience." He had laughed then. Now, her words felt like judgment. The doorbell rang. It was close to midnight. Daniel froze, half expecting a reporter or a lawyer. But when he opened the door, a man in his 60s stood there, gray suit, eyes calm as winter rain. "Mr. Reid?" he asked. "I'm Harold Crane. I used to work with your father." Daniel blinked. "Why are you here?" Harold handed him an envelope. "Your mother asked me to give you this." Daniel hesitated, taking the letter but not inviting him in. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, his mother's scent. Inside was a single line written in her neat, steady handwriting. "You can't rebuild something you sold to strangers." No anger, no plea, just fact. Daniel crumpled it and tossed it onto the counter. "Tell her I don't need her guilt." Harold nodded, his eyes studying Daniel's face like a doctor watching a patient refuse medicine. "She's not angry," he said, "just disappointed. You could have told her the truth." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Truth doesn't pay bills." Harold turned toward the elevator, pausing only once. "Neither does shame. Not for long." When he left, Daniel sat in silence, the letter still pulsing in his mind like a wound that wouldn't close. Days passed. His penthouse grew emptier as he sold furniture to pay back debts. Calls from friends stopped. Whispers replaced admiration. The newspaper printed a small story about the fall of Daniel Reid, calling it a cautionary tale of misplaced trust. He stared at it for hours before throwing it into the trash. One night, he drove aimlessly until the city lights faded into darkness and the hills returned. The road wound toward the vineyard, now owned by men who didn't know the soil beneath their shoes. He parked outside the gate, headlights cutting through the mist. Evelyn stood under the porch light, wearing her old sweater, her expression unreadable. He stepped out, rain soaking his hair. "Why are you here?" she asked. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. "You're winning, aren't you?" he said. "You got what you wanted." She studied him, hands clasped. "What I wanted," she repeated softly. "All I wanted was a son who remembered what our name meant." He clenched his fists. "You think I did this to hurt you? I did it for us." "No," she said quietly. "You did it for you. And now you're learning what alone feels like." The rain intensified, drumming on the porch roof. Daniel's chest rose and fell. "You could have helped me," he whispered. "You could have warned me." Evelyn's eyes filled but never broke. "I tried, Daniel. Every silence was a warning you refused to hear." He turned away, shame twisting in his throat. The world that once bowed to him now felt smaller than the space between them. "They took everything," he said finally. "Everything." She walked forward, placing something in his hand, the key to the old farmhouse. "Not everything," she said. "Just what wasn't yours." He stared at the key, confused, as she turned back toward the door. "Mom," he started, but she stopped him with a glance that held both pain and finality. "Go home, Daniel. Find the boy who used to love this place before money made him a stranger." The door closed softly behind her. He stood there for a long time, soaked and trembling, the key cold against his skin. When he finally drove away, dawn was breaking, washing the hills in pale light. His phone buzzed again, a new message from an unknown number. This time it was a scanned document. Petition for ownership review, Reid Vineyard. Filed by Evelyn Reid. Represented by Harold Crane, attorney of record. Beneath it, a single line of text read, "Truth always finds its name again." Daniel's eyes blurred as he gripped the steering wheel, realizing the quiet war had already begun. The first document Evelyn pulled from the drawer smelled faintly of dust and wine, her husband's handwriting looping across the margin like a quiet ghost. Original ownership, signed by Robert Reid. It read, sealed with a family crest. She placed it beside Daniel's printed contract, the one she found carelessly left behind on his last visit. The difference between the two signatures wasn't just ink. It was a difference between love and greed. Her fingers trembled once before she steadied them. If he could forge her name, then she could use truth to erase his lies. When the knock came that evening, she already knew who it was. Harold Crane stood in the doorway. The same gray suit, the same tired eyes that had watched her husband die with a pen in his hand instead of a weapon. "You found it?" he asked. She nodded, motioning him inside. "Every deed, every sale, every forged page." He thought I wouldn't notice the missing signatures. Harold sat, his movements slow, deliberate. "You could press charges." Evelyn shook her head. "No, I'm not here to ruin him. I'm here to make him face what he did." Harold studied her, the weight of years softening his tone. "You remind me of Robert when he fought the first investors. Calm before the storm." She smiled faintly. Robert believed truth doesn't shout. It just waits for the noise to die. They worked until midnight, sorting papers, comparing signatures, matching dates. For every lie Daniel had signed, Evelyn found a truth older and stronger. The vineyard still legally bore her husband's name in parts Daniel hadn't noticed. The land he sold wasn't fully his to sell. Somewhere between arrogance and ignorance, her son had left cracks in the foundation of his deceit. By dawn, she leaned back, exhaustion in her eyes but peace in her voice. "We'll start with the county office," she said. "If the records still hold the old seals, the sale isn't valid." Harold nodded, packing the folders neatly. "You realize this could destroy what's left of his reputation." She looked at the framed photo of Daniel as a boy, holding a basket of grapes taller than himself. Reputation isn't worth anything when you've already lost your name. The next day, she walked into the county records building with Harold beside her. People greeted her politely. Most remembered her as the vineyard widow, the woman who'd worked her land when no one else would. She smiled, though her eyes didn't. The clerk, a young woman barely older than Daniel had been when he'd first learned to prune vines, hesitated when she saw the documents. "Ma'am, these signatures, they don't match the digital records." "Exactly," Evelyn said calmly. "That's why I'm here." As the clerk examined the papers, Harold leaned close. "If we can prove tampering, the sale's frozen." Evelyn nodded, her gaze steady. "I don't want to freeze it. I want to show him what happens when he sells roots that still breathe." They left the office with copies of the official seals, proof of inconsistency. Step by step, truth was becoming a structure she could stand on. That night, Evelyn sat on the porch again, the same chair where she'd once waited for Daniel's car lights to appear down the dirt road. Now only silence answered. She held one of the deeds in her hand, tracing the ink with her thumb. "You taught him honesty," Harold said softly behind her. "He forgot." She looked up, her eyes wet but sharp. "No, he learned it. He just traded it for a cheaper promise." Harold hesitated before placing a small recorder on the table. "You should keep this. If he tries to deny anything in court, this might help." She pressed a button. Daniel's voice crackled faintly, a voicemail he'd once left her by accident. "Mom, I need those old papers. Just sign them, okay? It's nothing serious." He had laughed then, thinking it harmless. Now that same laugh felt like a confession. She closed the recorder and whispered, "Thank you, Daniel." In the following days, Evelyn visited every person who had known Robert, the banker, the notary, even the old vineyard foreman. Each held fragments of truth, a letter, a ledger, a memory. Piece by piece, she rebuilt the story Daniel had tried to bury. Harold watched quietly, sometimes reminding her to rest, sometimes just carrying the folders when her hands shook. "You don't hate him," he said one afternoon as they left another meeting. "Most people would." She smiled sadly. "Hate is easy, but love with boundaries, that's harder. I just wanted to understand what he traded for nothing." Harold looked at her, admiration hidden behind professionalism. "He will. The law's on your side." "No," she said softly. "The truth is, the law just catches up." A week later, she received a letter from Daniel, short, defensive, written like a man still pretending control. "You don't understand business, Mom. I did this for us. Stop digging before you embarrass yourself." She folded it neatly and placed it in the same drawer where the first deed had rested for decades. Then she picked up the phone and called Harold. "It's time," she said. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and cleaner. The clerk stamped the final petition and slid it toward her. "Once filed, ma'am, this becomes public record." Evelyn nodded. "Good. Truth should never hide." Outside, sunlight hit her face. She exhaled slowly, the weight of months lifting. Harold handed her a copy of the petition. "He'll know by morning." "Let him," she said. "Every secret deserves daylight." That evening, as she walked back to the vineyard, she paused at the edge of the field. Workers had returned, new ones hired by the new management. Yet when they saw her, they stopped respectfully. She smiled, stepping through the rows, touching the leaves her husband had once planted. The wind carried the scent of soil and memory. For a moment, she closed her eyes and imagined Robert beside her, his voice steady as always. "Don't fight him with anger, Eve. Fight him with truth. It lasts longer." She opened her eyes, strength returning like breath after drowning. The horizon glowed orange with dusk. Somewhere in the city, Daniel's phone was ringing, lawyers calling, investors panicking. Evelyn didn't need to hear it. She knew the sound of a storm breaking when she felt one. She turned toward the house, lights flickering inside, Harold's car waiting by the porch. He leaned against it, holding the final folder. "You ready for court?" he asked. Evelyn smiled, her voice steady and calm. "I've been ready since the day he sold our name." She walked past him into the house, closing the door gently behind her. Moments later, her phone buzzed, a message from Daniel, short and shaking. "What have you done?" She stared at it for a long time, then typed a single reply before setting the phone face down. "I told the truth." The first time Daniel saw his mother in the courtroom, she wasn't sitting in the audience. She was standing at the plaintiff's table, calm, composed, her silver hair pinned neatly, her hands resting on a stack of documents that could dismantle his entire world. The sound of the gavel echoed through the room, cutting through the air like a blade. "Case number 421, Reid versus Reid," the judge announced. Daniel swallowed hard. He had imagined this moment differently. Perhaps in an office, perhaps over coffee, maybe even in tears. Not here, not in front of strangers, not with his mother as his opponent. His lawyer whispered something about strategy, but Daniel's mind was a storm. He looked at Evelyn, hoping to find anger in her eyes. Instead, he found disappointment, quieter, sharper, more painful than rage. When she finally spoke, her voice carried across the room like a hymn meant for truth, not vengeance. "My husband built that vineyard with his hands," she began. "When he died, I kept it alive for our son. I believed that one day he would honor what we started. I was wrong." The judge nodded slowly, inviting her to continue. Daniel's lawyer objected, calling it emotional testimony, but the objection was overruled. "The emotion," the judge said, "is the point." Evelyn opened the folder before her, revealing forged contracts, mismatched signatures, and a letter Daniel had written to one of the investors, the same letter that had been forwarded to Harold Crane weeks earlier. "This is my son's handwriting," she said quietly, "and this is my name, signed without my consent." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Daniel's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, whispering for him to stay calm. But Daniel couldn't. His throat closed, his pulse hammering in his ears. Every lie he had told suddenly felt louder in the silence between his mother's sentences. "Mrs. Reid," the judge asked, "are you pressing criminal charges?" Evelyn shook her head. "No, Your Honor. I'm asking the court to return ownership of the vineyard to its rightful name, my husband's, not for money, for truth." Her restraint hit harder than any accusation could have. Daniel clenched his fist beneath the table, his nails digging into his palms. When it was his turn to speak, he stood slowly, avoiding her gaze. "I did what I thought was best," he said, his voice cracking. "The vineyard was dying. I made deals to save it." She wouldn't listen. Evelyn's eyes softened, but her words didn't. "You didn't save it, Daniel. You sold it." His breath caught. "I did it for us," he shouted, the room echoing his desperation. The judge raised a hand for silence. Evelyn looked at her son, really looked, and for a moment, the years melted away. She didn't see the man in the suit. She saw the boy who used to run barefoot through the vines, laughing at bees, dreaming of being like his father. "You did it for yourself," she said gently, "and I forgive that. But I can't let it erase everything your father built." Harold Crane stepped forward, handing the judge the original deeds, notarized and unbroken. His calm voice filled the tension. "These are the documents, Your Honor. The vineyard, by law, was never fully transferred. The sale was invalid without Mrs. Reid's signature." The courtroom went still. Daniel's lawyer flipped through papers, looking for loopholes, but there were none left. The truth was a net, and Daniel had tangled himself inside it. The judge reviewed the documents, then looked up. "It appears the plaintiff's claim is legitimate. Ownership will revert to Evelyn Reid until further notice." A hush swept across the room. Daniel exhaled, half in disbelief, half in surrender. His lawyer muttered something about appeals, But Daniel barely heard. All he could see was his mother, standing there, not triumphant, not vengeful, just heartbreakingly steady. When the session adjourned, reporters crowded the hallway. Cameras flashed, microphones reached forward. Evelyn ignored them all. She walked straight to Daniel, stopping a few feet away. "You could have come to me," she said quietly. "I would have helped you." His voice broke, raw and small. "You didn't have to do this here. You left me no other place," she said. "You stopped listening at home." He looked down, shame flooding his face. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she sighed, tears brimming but never falling. "Intentions don't erase damage, Daniel, but learning from them can." For the first time in years, he didn't have an answer. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small silver key, the same one she'd given him months ago on that rainy night. "This still opens a farmhouse," she said. "Come back when you remember what home feels like." Then she turned, walking past the crowd, her shoulders straight despite the weight she carried. Harold followed, keeping reporters at bay. Daniel stood frozen as flashes burst around him, questions cutting through the noise. How does it feel to lose everything? Was it worth it? Did your mother outsmart you? He pushed through them silently, stepping out into the street. The sky was overcast, heavy with unshed rain, mirroring the storm inside him. He walked aimlessly until he reached a park bench, collapsing onto it, his hands trembling. The letter from the court still in his pocket felt heavier than stone. He unfolded it slowly, reading the line that confirmed it all. Ownership transferred. Evelyn Reid, legal custodian. Beneath it, his name appeared in black ink, reduced to a footnote. For the first time, he realized what she had truly done. She hadn't destroyed him. She had stripped away the illusions he built to hide from himself. His phone buzzed, a single message from an unknown number. It was a photograph of the vineyard at sunset, golden light washing over the rows, a woman standing alone at the edge. The caption read, "Still growing." His chest tightened. He knew she hadn't sent it for pride, but as an invitation to see, to understand, to return. He sat there until night swallowed the park, headlights passing like ghosts. When he finally rose, the city noise seemed distant, hollow. Somewhere beyond it all, his mother's silence waited, not as punishment, but as mercy. He looked toward the horizon, whispering to no one, "I'll make it right." And as the rain began to fall, Daniel started walking home.